I hope everyone is safe and well. And we got people phoning in from several parts of UK and as far as away from even from Bangalore. We got a few folks who have joined in as well. So thank you again for sparing your another hour and a half or so with us today. And thanks to Abhijit and Sudarshan for organizing these wonderful community events. And it feels like almost there is something happening every day to keep our mind occupied. The reality out there is pretty grim and depressing, but I think we need to focus on the positives. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one of the essential requirements for philosophical inquiry is to sit in a quiet place away from people. So the self-isolation that's been going on for a few weeks is absolutely helping us all in a positive way. So anyway, come all of you. So before we get started, from author Badram Karanebihi Shrunyama Devaha Badram Pashima Akshabhihi Yajatraha Stirai Rangair Tushtvam Sastanubihi Vyashema Devahitai Yadayuhu Swastina Vridrashavaha Swastinaha Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinaha Taraksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Dhaspati Yo Antaha Pravishyama Gavadavakya Pramanajnan Pranamya Shirasa Gurun Yakarishye Yatabhotam Vishnu Tattva Vinirnayam. Okay, so good evening. So the topic for today is creation and its purpose. And I've slightly changed the title, as you will see. I've said views from Vedas / Upanishads, and not views from Vedas and Upanishads. That somehow feels that Veda is different from Upanishads. But essentially, Vedas and Upanishads are the same. They form the same part of a big text. And we discussed this 2 or 3 weeks ago as to how Vedas, by definition, are infinite, and Upanishads form a component of the Vedas. So the topic for today's discussion is creation and its purpose. From the reality out there, you might feel that this is such an esoteric, such a vague and a vague, complicated topic. How does it make any sense to the reality that exists out there? So hopefully over the next hour or so, I will be able to convince you what is the Vedic view of creation and how is it very relevant to our day-to-day lives. So moving on to the next slide, I have put a slide here which I've taken from Google Images to just try and understand what is the Big Bang Theory. And I've just put this on because when we talk about universe and when we talk about creation, you cannot have a sensible discussions about the creation of the universe unless you understand what's the current modern prevailing scientific understanding of what the creation is all about. Now, as most of you are probably aware, about 15-20 years ago, the most prevailing theory was the steady state theory, which means that the universe was never created and it has always been there and it's infinite and so on and so forth. So that was the view about 15-20 years ago. And over the last 15-20 years with various satellites and telescopes and stuff that we have, and I'm told that there is sufficient evidence for us to believe that the universe is actually expanding. So the inference from that is if the universe is expanding, then it must have started from some point, and from there it has been expanding. And that's how this whole theory of the Big Bang Theory has come about. Now, within the scientific community, there's always been a little bit of debate initially about whether it is a steady state theory or is it the Big Bang Theory. The reason why the Big Bang Theory initially had some resistance is because even among scientists out there, there are two diverging poles. One, the scientists who are of atheistic background and scientists who are of a spiritual background. Yeah. So within science, it's always been accepted that if a Big Bang theory is taken as the reason why the universe was created, then by stealth, it would mean that if the Big Bang happened, who created the Big Bang? Yeah. And the scientists of the atheistic predisposition have always been reluctant to accept the fact that that explosion that resulted in the creation of the universe could not have happened by design, but it should have been accidental. So that's been the prevailing hypothesis for the Big Bang. So that the Big Bang happened, and then there was a massive expansion, and then a period of cooling happened, and the universe came into being. So for those of you who have physics background, you would be an expert in this area. I certainly have very little knowledge of astrophysics, except that I find it quite interesting. And from a philosophical perspective, there seems to be a lot of overlaps between the Big Bang theory and what the Vedic view of this is. So recently I was studying a book. I was reading a book called Rethinking Darwin. So it's a very fascinating book which gives perspectives from different directions and brings in the concept of the creation of the universe into the Darwinism and the neo-Darwinism that's quite prevalent these days. So the astrophysicist who was contributing to that particular chapter about rethinking Darwin describes some really interesting concepts about how the universe is extremely fine-tuned. If this was a random event and the explosion just happened, so just take you back a little bit. So the Big Bang started off with what's called as the point of singularity. The singularity we believe, and I believe the scientists believe, is a point of infinite mass, infinite gravity, infinite energy, and so on. And that point of singularity exploded. Okay. Now, was that explosion random? And after that explosion, whatever things that happened in the physical universe, is this also a random phenomenon? So the astrophysicist actually goes into that and to try and figure out some fundamental equations within astrophysics. So for example, he describes and he says that the physics and the laws of the universe is so fine-tuned, it's so perfect that it cannot have happened by accident. And he goes on to say that the laws of physics that operate during creation, unless it had been designed, it would not be in the position in which it is there at this point of time. So if you take our own solar system, Earth, where it sustains life, so there has to be perfect sets of circumstances. And if this is all by accident, then the statistics of this, the probability of such an accident to happen so that you have a perfect universe or a near perfect universe is improbable from mathematical perspective. So that is one argument by this astrophysicist. And then he goes on to show why the universe is fine-tuned. And he looks at, for example, the electromagnetic forces and the gravitational forces that operate between subatomic particles. And he says that ratio is fixed at 10 to the power 36. That is a fixed number. Now, it could have been 10 to the power 30. It could have been 10 to the power 40. But it is fixed at 10 to the power 36. And he goes on to explain what would have happened to the universe if that ratio was 10 to the power 30. And he says this universe with all the living beings in it would not have come into being. So he says that 10 to the power 36 is a perfect number. Then, as you know, in stars, for example, the primary element in the stars is hydrogen. And then they form helium. And they form helium how? You have deuteriums and two deuteriums form helium. And then he goes on to say that when two deuterium atoms bind together, helium is formed, but the mass of it is less than if you add both deuterium atoms together. And he calls that as the binding energy, which is again absolute. It is perfect, 0.07. If it was 0.03, The universe would have been in a different state. If it was at 0.09, the universe would have been in different states. So again, that number seems to be extremely fine-tuned and perfect. Then he goes on to say, in stars, you have hydrogen, then helium then becomes carbon. Carbon has 6 protons. So basically, 3 deuteriums have to bind together to form carbon. And then he talks about these resonant energy levels of each atom and how it has to be perfect for that order of things to happen. For example, he says, if all of the helium becomes carbon, or if all of the carbon becomes oxygen, then we would never have life. The resonant energies of oxygen is so fine-tuned that only a proportion of carbon gets converted into oxygen. Then, as you know, the reason why I'm bringing these concepts is much of life as we know on Earth is carbon-based, and oxygen is primarily required for our respiration. So even the element carbon that is there in the stars and in Earth is fine-tuned. The amount of oxygen seems to be fine-tuned. When the Big Bang happened, when all these clusters of masses then shrunk because of the gravity, the stars were formed. And then the physicist goes on to say even the distribution of mass was irregular. And even that seems to be controlled by this equation where Q equals 10 to the power minus 5. So he goes on to discuss these various critical values within the Big Bang that actually has brought about the universe as it is, as we see it at this point of time. So he essentially goes on to say, he quotes Sir Fred Hoyle, who's a famous cosmologist, who says laws of physics have been deliberately designed with regards to consequence they produce in stars. Basically, the laws of physics, he goes to the core questions. If these are the laws of physics that brought in the universe, who wrote these laws of physics is what Fred Hoyle is pointing us towards. Perhaps the laws of universe has been written by someone, and perhaps Big Bang was not an accident. So this is the modern view of how the universe and creation came about. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is what Sir Fred Hoyle has said in the last 10 or 15 years ago was actually said by Badarayana Vedavyasa 5,000 years ago when he composed the Vedantasutras. Now, the whole theory of Big Bang that I've explained now is essentially the Sankhya philosophy. Yeah, Sankhya system is one of the original schools of Indian philosophy. And there are 2 types of Sankhya philosophies. The primary Sankhya philosophy is what is called as Nir-Ishwara Sankhya. So the Nir-Ishwara Sankhya philosophy essentially is the Big Bang theory. And it explains how the Big Bang happened and how the universe came about. But it says you don't need an Ishwara. You don't need a God or an intelligent being to design this universe, and that this universe was an accident or it happened because it was its inherent nature for the point of singularity to explode at some point and create the universe. So this was the view of the Sankhya philosophers. And many of our cosmologists of these days appreciate the Sankhya philosophy. And in fact, most cosmologists now agree the original cosmology actually came from the Sankhya philosophy from India. So now, going back to the Nirishwara Sankhya philosophy, which says there is no God and the Big Bang just happened, Vedavyasa in the Vedanta Sutras, and we touched about the topic of Vedanta Sutras a few weeks ago, picks up this topic. So there is an adhyaya called Avirodha Adhyaya in Vedanta Sutra or Brahmasutra. Basically, it takes up these various concepts and deals with them head on. So here, from Sankhya perspective, the primordial matter or the point of singularity could itself be an independent creative principle which has brought about the world into existence. So the Mula Prakriti itself may be admitted as the uncaused cause of all else. So this is the Sankhya philosophy in the current view. So Vedavyasa said, no, that is not possible. And he composed 4 aphorisms. The first one, I believe, is the most foundational aphorism of Badarayana that sets the scene for our subsequent discussion. And Vedavyasa said, Rachana anupapatteshta na anumanam. Then he said, Pravrutteshta. Then he said, Payombavachet tatrapi Vyatireka anavastitesht na anapekshatvat. So those were the 4 lines, and that's it. With 4 lines, is completely removed Nirishwara Sankhya and also non-atheistic cosmology of the Big Bang. So what does this mean? Let us just take the first sutra, Rachana Anupapatteshta na Anumanam. So Vyasa there says, self-volition or self-initiated activity can never come from a jada. A jada is an insentient being. So an insentient being is not capable of self-initiated action. So what does that mean? If I want to make a cup of coffee, I need milk, I need to put this in microwave, I need sugar, and I need coffee granules. If I take these 3 entities and place them on the table, can they mix and make coffee spontaneously? Are they capable of self-volition and making that cup of coffee? No, they are not. So that is a fundamental definition of where the Big Bang is coming from. The point of singularity is made of matter. Matter is jada. Self-volition or self-initiated activity of the point of singularity is impossible because it is insentient. So that is the fundamental argument of Vedavyasa in Vedantasutra to refute the Sankhya philosophers, the Nir-Ishvara Sankhya philosophers. Then he goes on to say, Pravrutteshcha. Pravrutteshcha means you see self-initiated activity only in a sentient being. Only in a living being, or the one that has consciousness, is the one that is capable of initiating self-initiated activities. So that is the Pravrutteshcha. So these 2 sutras gives you a background as to how to approach creation from a Vedic point of view. Then he goes on to give 2 very interesting examples. So the Sankhya philosophers then say, you know what, I don't agree with you. Look at the rivers. The rivers flow spontaneously. Yeah. Look at milk. Milk has become curd spontaneously. When the rivers can flow spontaneously, there wasn't somebody who pushed the river waters to flow. It is flowing spontaneously. Similarly, how the milk is spontaneously become curd. Is it not feasible that the Mula Prakriti spontaneously became the universe, or the Mula Prakriti became the world as we know today spontaneously? And again, Vedavyasa takes that argument and he cites from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and Rig Veda. And he says, Yetasya va aksharasya prashasane gargi prachyo anyaha nadyaha syandante yeshatebhyaha pravrittabhyaha praticha nadyaha yam cha disham anu. So he says, even the rivers, they are flowing because the Supreme has made it so. The Supreme has made it so that the water has got the physical property to flow spontaneously. And then he also cites Rig Veda to establish that fact that self-initiated activity cannot happen in a non-living thing, and that self-initiated activity is a process of a conscious being. Now, I wanted to introduce this concept and this first sutra of the Sutra of Badarayana or Vedavyasa, so that sets the scene for the subsequent slides that I want to discuss this evening. So moving on to the next slide, this is exactly the question that, and we've discussed this before. So the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, the Rishi there is asking this very first question, Kim Karanam? Okay, what is the origin of the universe? Kim Karanam? Is it Brahma? And then he takes all these various aspects, Kalaha, Swabhavo, Niyatir, Yadricha, Bhutani Yonihi, Purusha iti Chintyam, Samyoga Yesham, Natu Atma Bhavat, Atma Api Anishaha, Sukadukka Hetu. So he takes various components and says, none of these can be because they are all insentient. Kala, time. Is it time that is the creator of the universe? No, because time is insentient. It does not have ability for self-initiated activity. Is it Swabhavaha, is it the intrinsic nature of the point of singularity to create the universe? Then the Shvetashvara Upanishads, the seer says, no, it is not, because it is a non-living thing. So he goes on like this and arrives at there must be a creator for this universe by inference. And at the same time, most of the Vedas describe about this creator of the universe. Okay. So now the same Shvetashvatara Upanishad, then it goes on in that particular Upanishad to talk about what are all the entities that are there in all of existence. And the Shvetashvatara Rishi has compiled them or put them into three groups. He called them as Nya, Agnya, and Deva. Okay. So Agnya means Jada. Agnya means thing that does not know it exists. A stone does not know it exists. Yeah. So it doesn't have the knowledge of its own existence. It does not have the knowledge of the existence of others. So that is the definition of a Jada. And in the Shvetashvara Upanishad, that is said that Jada is called Agnya. Then you have the Nya. Nyas are infinite. So these are the Jivas. Why are they Nyas? Nyas means the ones that have Jnana, the ones that have awareness. What are the awareness? They have the awareness of themselves and awareness of the world outside them. So awareness of the external selves. So awareness of us and the external world is the classic definitions of consciousness. So Jivas have consciousness. Stones do not have that kind of consciousness of being aware of the external world and themselves. So Jivas are called Nya. And Deva is what the Shvetashvatara Upanishad calls Brahman or God, who is aware of everything else. Okay, so these are the three basic concepts: Brahman, Jiva, and Jada. So these three are there. Now, the whole universe and its creation is an interplay between these three entities. Okay, so the Brahman can create himself. He comes as avatars, as you know, in various yugas, and we'll talk about this later. And he creates jivas, i.e., he gives them bodies and brings them into existence. And he also creates matter during the Big Bang. So the Brahman or the Deva, in a sense, is responsible for the creation of the jivas and matter. Moving on to the next slide. So this is very interesting. So now I'm just giving you an idea of that there is a creation. So there is a Big Bang. We all accept, the Vedic philosophy also accepts that there was a Big Bang. But the Vedic view is that Big Bang was not an accident, but it happened for a purpose and it happened at some point in time. So the next question, and this is a fascinating question that happens, and in my humble opinion, no other philosophy in this world has actually addressed this problem. You ask any physicist, any astrophysicist about the Big Bang, they'll have innumerable theories as to what happened after the Big Bang. This condensation happened, this energy happened, and so on and so forth. So everybody has a view of what happened after the Big Bang. The Vedas go and say what was there before the Big Bang. Okay? No other philosophy or religion or paths of science has actually looked at this. What was there before Big Bang? The current astrophysical view is, yeah, there was infinite energy and then there was infinite mass, and that's it. You can't go any further describing about what else was there. But the Nasadiya Sukta of Rig Veda, it gives you a hint of what was there before creation. So this is a very, very popular suktam, 10th mandala, 129th sukta of Rig Veda. Is very popular among Vedic scholars, among cosmologists who try and look at these angles. There is various versions of this, there is various interpretations of this. What I'm going to do is spend 2 or 3 minutes and explain what is the interpretation based on Nirukta. Nirukta is etymology of words, and we discussed about etymology, Vedangas. We did 2 or 3 sessions before, that there are 6 Vedangas. Yeah, Kalpo, Siksha, Kalpo, Vyakaranam, Niruktam, Chando, Jyotishamiti. Yeah. So nirukta is the origin of words, and it is about the etymology of words. So we'll use that, and we'll use vyakarana, grammar, to try and understand this. So just to remind you, the first 3 lines of the Nasadiya Suktam, or rather the first 5 lines of Nasadiya Suktam, is basically talking about what was there before it. It says, Nasadasi no sadasit tadanim nasit rajo no vyoma aparoyat. Kim avariha kuhakasya sharamanna ambakkimasid gahanam gaviram. Na mrityurasid amrutam na tarhi na ratraya ahna asid praketaha. Anidavatam swadaya tadekam tasmadhananna parakinchanasa tama asid tamasa gulramagare apraketam salilam sarvama idam. So that is the first 5 lines of the Nasadiya Sukta. So basically what it's saying is, the first line is very important. It says, Na sad asit. Okay, Na asad asit, na sad asit. Okay, Tadanim. Tadanim means, then means what? Before creation, there was neither asat, there was neither sat. Okay, there was no sat, no asat, then tadanim. Then it says, so what were the things that were not there? So it says sat was not there, asat was not there, raja was not there, vyoma was not there, mrityu was not there, amrutam was not there, night was not there, day was not there. So this is extremely, it's full of mystery when he describes that situation before the Big Bang. So now the common interpretation of Sat is existence, and another interpretation for Asat is non-existence. So you will see a lot of confusing things that are being said in the internet and in various articles, that there was neither existence nor non-existence, and then the sukta goes on like that. Okay, so there is a slightly more easier way of looking at this from a cosmology perspective, using nirukta and vyakarana. So the word sat and asat can mean, sat means bhava in one sense, bhava means existence, asat means abhava, which means non-existence. But there are also other meanings for sat and asat in Sanskrit grammar and Sanskrit etymology. So one meaning for sat is murta. Murta means the one that is manifested, and asat means amurta, means one that is not manifested, or murta means one that has form, and amurta means one that does not have form. Okay, so there is another meaning also, asat standing for cause and sat standing for effect. So what we are going to do for today's discussion is just to take that murta and amurta, that is, the one has form and one that does not have form. So that will fit in very neatly in the Nasadiya Sukta. So basically what the Vedic Rishi is saying is, before creation, there was neither form nor there was no form, which means that there was something which was so subtle that it did not have a form, and that you cannot say it does not have a form. It neither had a form nor is it formless. It was so subtle. Okay, so that is one meaning of that. Then it also goes on to say tama asid. Okay, tadanim means then, time. So it gives you a hint that before Big Bang, time existed. Okay, so this is a very advanced level of physics. So the current cosmology theory is relative time of, seconds to minutes to hours and days and so on. That relative time started from the Big Bang, whereas before the Big Bang there was absolute time, everlasting present. Okay, so that is what the Rishi is saying. Tadanim, then there was only a everlasting present, but tama asit. So, but there was tamas was there. So then the many philosophers talk about what is the tamas, and one of the meanings for tamas is primordial matter. Okay, tamas can have various connotations. Tamas as a tamoguna, tamas as ignorance, tamas as darkness, but tamas is also a name for mula prakriti or primordial matter. So it is this primordial matter that is so subtle that it has still not become Sat and Asat. Sat means Murta. Murta means that which has form. That which has form is three. The three that has form in the Panchabhutas are Tejas, Aap, and Prithvi. So those are the three which we can actually see with our eyes, which has form. Whereas Asat are Vyoma and Vayu. So the space and air which we cannot see is called Asat. So basically those two is described as tamas. So a primordial matter existed. So that is tamas existed. And then it says there was another guy who existed. He is Anidavatam Swadaya Tadekam. So there was one guy who was in that primordial creation, who was sitting there breathing windlessly, Swadaya as an independent being, as a self-dependent being and an independent being. He was lying on that cosmic, subtle Mula Prakriti waters. Salilam. Salilam is that primordial ocean, that primordial motion of subtle matter on which was lying this person. So the Vedas actually give you that sense of what was there before creation. Yeah, and then of course this mantra goes on to talk about how did he then start the creation and so on. So we'll see that in subsequent slides. So for all that I have said so far, I'm putting in evidence within the Vedas. So to interpret and understand a particular text within the Rig Veda, for example, one doesn't have to imagine and come up with what one has in one's mind, but actually we'll have to go and find internal evidence within the Vedas themselves. And as you know, most of us in our daily lives would do that. If, for example, we don't understand something in our field of inquiry, we would go into the text and references within our field to understand what somebody is saying about a topic. So that is exactly what you need to do. And there are two big Shrutis. Shruti is a Vedic text that actually talk about what Murta and Amurta is. Murtam Sad, that is the next slide. So Murtam Saditi Samproktam, Amurtam Asad Uchyate. That is Paingini Shruti, making it very clear what is Murta and what is Amurta. Murta is Sat, Amurta is Asad. Madhyandina Shruti, which is part of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, again says, Yad Anyad Vayoscha Antarikshamcha Etad Sat. Okay. That which is different from Vayu, that is air, and space is Sat, which means, as I said before, Tejas, Aap, and Prithvi is Sat. So these kind of definitions, internal references that one needs to take to understand the Nasadiya Sukta. Now in Gita itself, there is a very puzzling, very enigmatic verse, 16th verse in chapter 2. Na asataha vidyate bhavo, na abhavo vidyate sataha, ubayorapi drishtontvastu anayoho tattvadarshibhi. Okay, so there is the two words come, Sat and Asat. So all the three acharyas, Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva, they take the Sat and Asat and ask the question, what does Vedavyasa stroke Krishna actually means by Sat and Asat in this particular verse? It can mean right. Sat can mean right in that context. Asat can mean wrong. Or Sat can mean Brahman. Asat can mean Avyakta or Mula Prakriti. So there are various, the reason why I put this is to illustrate upon the fact that there is no one meaning for Sat and one meaning for Asat. It is Sanskrit, as we have discussed before, is a very expansive language. Each word in Sanskrit can have multiple levels of meaning. So similarly here, Sat has various meanings and Asat has various meanings. Yeah. So coming back to our pre-creation state, now we understand in the pre-creation state, there was this Mula Prakriti or subtle matter. And then there was the Supreme who was sitting on it. Okay. Then he at some point started the creation. This is the cosmology of the Vedas. Now, in the Upanishads themselves, in any Upanishad that you see, you'll come across this often, the word Agre and Sarge. Okay, if moving on to the next slide, Abhijit. So, so if you go into the Upanishads, creation and pre-creation is quite an important topic in the discussions within the Upanishads. So there is a word called Agre. Agre means before creation. Sarge means creation. So these are two common words you'll see. So if you take, say, for example, Chandogya Upanishad, it will say, Sadeva Somya Idamagra Asid. Sat was there before creation. And if you look at Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it will say, Atmava Idamagra Asid. If you look at Taittiriya Upanishad, it will say, Asadva Idamagra Asid. Then if you go to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in another context, in another adhyaya, it will say, Naiveda Yakintana Agra Asid. If you go to another chapter, it will say, Brahmava Idamagra Asid. Okay, so this is important concept for the Upanishads, and they take references from the Nasadiya Sukta. They take their inspirations from the Nasadiya Sukta of the Rig Veda, and the rishis see this. They see in their intuition, they see in their deep meditations, these knowledge that Brahmava Idamagra Asid is that Brahman who existed before creation, and he is also called Sat, as we know, Satva Idamagra Asid. Yeah. Now, in Bhagavatam, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Bhagavatam. There is something called Chatushloki Bhagavatam. In Chatushloki Bhagavatam, the very first verse is Ahameva asamagre cha na anyad sad asat param. Okay, so that is the very first verse. It says Aham eva asamagre. Aham means God. Aham eva asamagre. I was the one who was there before creation. Na anyad, not others. What are the others? Sat and Asat. Okay. So again, even the Chatushloki Bhagavatam is basically talking about what the Rishi of the Nasadiya Sukta has seen. Yeah. So this concept of Agre and Sarge is quite important. And I want you to just have those two words in your mind, Agre and Sarge. Because I'm going to come to it in a few slides from now. Okay, moving on to the next slide, Abhijit. So now we have said that there was this pre-creation, there was this Mula Prakriti, and on top of the Mula Prakriti was this Brahman, who is also called Brahma, Sat, and he's got so many other names. Okay. Now, he brings forth the creation next. So in the Vedanta Sutras, and we discussed this maybe last week or the week before, we said the very first aphorism of Vedanta Sutra is called Om Atato Brahma Jijnasa Om. That is, then therefore the inquiry into Brahman shall begin. Yeah. Then it goes on to define who is this Brahman, and it says Janmadhyasya Yataha. That is the second sutra that is there on top of the slide. So Janmadhyasya Yataha is the definition of this Brahman or God. Okay. He who is the creator of the universe is Brahman, or he who is the creator, etc., of the universe is Brahman. Adi, Janmadi means, Janma means creation, etc. Okay. So what are those etc.? So Skanda Puran, for example, gives a proper, neat definition of that. It says, Utpatti, Sthiti, Samhara, Niyatir, Jnanam, Avruttihi, Bandha, Moksha, Cha, Purushat, Yasmat, Sa, Harire Karat. So it is basically giving you eightfold dispensations. Utpatti, Sthiti, Samhara, Niyati. So Utpatti means creation, Niyati means maintenance, Samhara means destruction, and Niyati means control. Okay, that is 4. Then it says Jnanam, Avruttihi, Bandha, Moksha. So it says 4 more. Okay, so these are the eightfold dispensations. So the first 4 is relevant for both Jadas and Jivas. So that is for both Ajna and Nya of Shvetashvatara Upanishad, if you remember from my previous slides. So that creation, maintenance, destruction, and control applies to both Jada and Chetana. Whereas Jnanam, Avrutti, Bandha, and Moksha applies only to sentient beings. It is the sentient beings that have ignorance. It is the sentient beings that have knowledge. It is the sentient beings that are on Bandha, means in samsara. They are in this bondage. Or it is the sentient beings that get liberation. So these 4 states apply only to Jivas. So those are the eightfold dispensation that this Brahman does to the universe of matter and souls. Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, gives a very beautiful statement. Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti, abhisamvishanti, tad vijijñāsasva, Tad Brahmeti. It lists 4 here. And there are other Upanishads that list 3, and there are other Upanishads that list more than 4. Yeah. So the combined is very well explained in Skanda Puran as eightfold dispensations of the world of matter and souls. Rig Veda Samhita also gives a beautiful, beautiful statement. It says, Yo naha pita janita yo vidata damani veda bhuvanani vishwa. So he is the one who has created everything in the universe, is what the Rig Veda Samhita is also saying. So from all this, we understand that the Vedas are unanimous in saying that it is the Supreme Being who is the creator of the universe. Okay. So the next question is he the creator, that is why he is called as God, or is he God first and then he is the creator? So that question arises. We call somebody as God because he has created the universe, or he is God first and then he has created the universe. So there are two views, two ways of approaching this. The Vedic philosophers have said it in no clear terms that he is God first and then he is the creator. And we define him as the creator of universe because by having such a definition, in our limited capacities and in our limited capabilities of knowledge, we can appreciate an element of the infinite greatness of the Supreme Being. In his creation, in his infinite creation, we can understand how infinitely supreme he is. Last week in Purusha Sukta, we discussed about the 3 essential qualities of creatorships. We said you need to have Icha Shakti, you need to have Jnana Shakti, and then you need to have Kriya Shakti. You have to be omniscient, you have to be omnipotent, and you need to be a Sarvakarta to be able to do this. That was the concept from the Purusha Sukta Rig Veda. So what I want to emphasize here is Vedas do not define God as a creator of the universe. Vedas says he God first, because he is God, he is the creator of the universe. So there are subtle differences here. Now, what is the implications of this? That God is a creator of the universe. Okay, so this is an important point, but it can also be a controversial point, but something for us to think about. Okay, and something for all of us to think about, and maybe in subsequent weeks we may have a discussion on this. So Jayatirtha was a great philosopher of the 14th century. He made a statement. He said, Janmadhyasya yataha iti Bhagavata sutrakarena jagat udayadi nimitta karanatvam parasya brahmano lakshanam abhihitam nacha jagat satyatam antarena tat vastavam sambhavati sapina parodirita prapancha mityatva pramanasya abhasata vyutpadanena vina tadartam idam prakaranam arabate bhagavan acharya. So what Jayatirtha is saying is, Vedavyasa has defined this Brahman as Janmadhyasya Yataha, he who is the creator of the universe. So the next logical question here is, if the Vedavyasa has defined that he is the creator of this universe, then by implication that means that his creation has to be real. Okay, I want you to think about that. Okay? If God has created this universe, then that created universe has to be real. Otherwise, why bother saying Janmadhyasya Yataha as a definition of the Supreme? There is no point in me saying he is a great artist, but his art is false. What kind of credit are we giving to the Supreme Being? Yeah. So he asks us to think about this. One, that if God has created this universe, that universe has to be real. And everything in the universe that is operating has to be real. And the next one that we discussed a few minutes ago is we also infer from the creatorship of God that he is an abode of infinite auspicious attributes. What's called Sarva Guna Purnatva. So these are two foundational concepts of God as a being of infinite auspicious attributes, and that he creates the universe which is real. Okay. So this is a particular philosophical view that perhaps maybe we can go back and think about it and as to whether it makes sense. Most philosophies of the world, most religions of the world accept this concept of God being infinitely blissful and has infinite knowledge. Okay, and that his creation is real. So moving on to the next slide, Abhijit ji, do you want to move on to the next slide? Now this concept is discussed further, and I'm not going to go too far. I'm going to go to Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'm going to take the very first verse. Bhagavatam is such a huge text. It's volumes of work. And I know that in Stoke you're doing classes on Bhagavatam as well. It is a humongous text. You don't have to go very far. Just look at the very first verse of Bhagavatam. What is it saying? Janmadhyasya yato anvayad itarastashta arteshva vignaha swarat tene brahma hridayadi kavaye muhyanti yam surayaha tejo vari mrudam yata vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha damna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi. This is the very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, and it is the very first verse that is the summary of all of Vedic philosophy. Okay. So I just want to spend 2 minutes going through this verse, and I would also encourage you to pick up your Bhagavatam books and read the first verse. There are certain words in that Bhagavatam first line that proves that according to the Bhagavatam also the world is real and the creator is a person of infinite auspicious attributes. So the first one, it says Janmadhyasya yataha, which we discussed from the Sutra of Badarayana. So it's Veda Vyasa who is the composer of Bhagavatam. So not surprisingly, he has put his own second sutra of Vedantasutra into the Bhagavatam. Janmadhyasya yataha. So that Janmadhyasya yataha can be split in so many ways. That's one of the beauties of Sanskrit is the sentence, the one. Other one is Janma Adyasya yataha. Adya is Chaturmukha Brahma.
Madhu.
Of the entire universe.
Madhu.
Okay. Yeah.
There has been a bit of freeze in the past 2 minutes. Your audio was not heard properly.
Oh dear. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
But if you want to repeat whatever you said in the past 2 minutes, please.
Okay. So, what I was telling was, having discussed about Janmadhyasya yataha, I was talking about the concept of how Srimad Bhagavatam is also dealing with the same concept, because in the previous slide I said, by the creatorship of the God, we understand two things. Number one, that he has infinite auspicious attributes, and number two, his creation has to be real. Okay. This is a controversial issue. It's a philosophical point, something for us to think about. So then I progressed on to this slide to say that even in Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a core philosophy of the Vedas and the Upanishads, the same concept comes not too far away, but in the very first verse. And it says, Janmadhyasya yataha, and I recited that verse. And I've taken the first word and said, Janmadi asya yataha, or he who is the origin of Chaturmukha Brahma. And how can I know about this how can I know about this God? Veda Vyasa puts the next word called Anvaya. So if you go to Vedantasutra, the fourth sutra is called Tattu Samanvaya. So the same Samanvaya comes here Anvaya. Anvaya means of reading all and understanding the core essence inside it. Itarataha means logic. So using this, what do we understand? He is Arteshu Abhignaha, which means that he is all-knowing, and that Swarat means he is an independent supreme king, Lord. He is Swatantra. Yeah, and then he does he uses three things to do three types of creations: Tejo, Vari, and Mrudam. Teja means fire, Vari means water, Mrudam means mud. Okay. Yatra Trisargo Mrisha. Three means three. Sarga means creation, as I said before. Three Sargo Mrisha. He does three types of creation. Damna Svena Sada. And then the next word is important. Nirasta Kuhakam. His creation is not an illusion. Nirasta Kuhakam is the word there, which nobody can refute. He creates a real world, a real creation, and it is not an illusion. And then he says, such a Lord is Satyam. Such a Lord is Param. Dhimahi, please give me good knowledge, protect me, and so on, is the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, which fits very well with what I have said so far. So now in Gita, so just before, Sudarshan, your audio is fine now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
But anybody else has got problem with audio?
Okay. So in Bhagavatam, the very first verse is describing the creation of the universe. And if you go to Gita, 15th chapter, and this is one of my most favorite chapters, and so is it the favorite chapters for everyone, because it is one of the most important chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, and we discussed that before. Last session we said if you can't find time to read the Bhagavad Gita 18 chapters, at least find time to read the 15th chapter. Okay, the first verse of the 15th chapter is so it's so pregnant with philosophical thought. I could go on for a couple of hours just talking about this, but I'm just going to take one or two words. The first verse says, Urdhva Moolam Adaha Shakam Ashwattam Prahur Avyayam Chandamsi Yasya Paranani Yastam Veda Saveda Vidu. So the very first word, Urdhva Moolam. Okay, Urdhva Moolam means the origin of this universe is high above. Okay, it's a literal meaning. But there are various Upanishads and Vedic references to say Urdhvo Vishnuhu. Okay, so in Aitareya Aranyaka, for example, Taitareya Aranyaka, there is a discussion about Urdhva. Who is this Urdhva? Okay, so Urdhvo Vishnuhu is the decision in the Upanishad. So then we understand Urdhva Moola means the origin of this universe is in that Vishnu, Urdhva. Okay, so even Gita is giving you these ideas about the origin of the universe, that it comes from that Supreme Person. So just pausing for a minute there, so far we have discussed about what existed before creation, and then what are the implications of that creation actually mean. Okay, and then we found some evidence in the Upanishads, and some evidence in Bhagavatam, and some evidence in Gita. But this whole study of the creation and the creatorship of the Lord is so vast that I don't think an hour and a half or an hour and a few minutes would justify the greatness of this topic. But I hope I'm giving you some ideas as to how you can make your own investigations into these concepts. So moving on to the next slide, Abhijit. So next the question is, okay, we have understood that the Supreme Being is there before creation, and that because he is a creator, Veda Vyasa has described as Janmadhyasya Yataha, because he is a creator of the universe. So the next question is, but how does the creation begin? How does he create? Yeah, he has to start at some point. And how does he create? If he, for example, at the end of Pralaya, he decides, okay, I'm getting bored, I'm going to bring the universe into creation. How is he going to do it? Taittiriya Upanishad and also in other Upanishads, there are profound discussions about this, that how did the Supreme decide to bring creation into being, and how did the creation happen? Okay, so this is a beautiful verse from Taittiriya Upanishad, and it goes on to say, so akamayat bahusyam prajayeya iti satapo atapyata satapastaptva idam sarvam asrujata yadidam kincha tat srishtva tadeva anupravishat tad anupravisha sat cha tvat cha bhavat. Okay, so that's a beautiful set of 4 lines from Taittiriya Upanishad that is actually giving you a description of how the Supreme creates the universe. He says, Saha akamayat. That means that Supreme Being desired, wished, wanted that Bahusyam Prajaye. Let me bring forth the multifarious universe and the souls into being. Okay. Satapo atapyata. So he meditated and thought that way. Satapastaptva, after meditating like that, idam sarvam asrajata. He created this whole material universe and also brought all the souls into creation. Okay. Then he said, yadidam kincha tat srishtva. After he created every component of his universe, the next word is extremely important. Tadeva anupravishatu. That means in every stages of his creation, he not only created, but he also got inside it. Tad eva anupravishatu means he got inside that. And then he did what? Tad anupravishya satucha tvatucha abhavat. After he got inside his creation, he gave them reality, he gave them their objecthood of knowledge, and he gave them their volition and to do whatever their purpose and activity in the universe has to be. So these three, Satta, Pramiti, and Pravritti, that God gives, Tadeva Anupravishata, after getting inside this. So this is the beauty of his creation, that in every component of the universe, he has pervaded. Okay. So now this concept of Tadeva Anupravishata is key, because if you go to Ishavasya Upanishad, it says Ishavasyam Idam Sarvam. Okay. This God, the supreme consciousness, this being, is pervaded everywhere. He is in every aspect of existence. He is inside the jivas, he is inside the jadas, he is everywhere. Why? Answer to that comes from the Taittiriya Upanishad of Tadeva Anupravishate. He is not like a potter. So if you look at a potter, what does a potter do? So the potter has jnana, ichcha, kriya, shakti. He has a knowledge as to how he knows how to make a pot. Then he has a knowledge of how to make a pot, and then he can put that the cloud of mud on that wheel, and he creates the pot. Okay, but once the pot is there, the pot is sitting on the table. The potter has not pervaded into the pot. So there is a slight difference with regards to how a pot is created. Whereas the Supreme Lord's creation is different. It is not like how a potter creates a pot. Supreme Lord creates the pot, and he also goes inside the pot and makes sure that this pot has its reality, that his pot becomes an object of knowledge for others, and that this pot serves a purpose of holding milk or whatever. Okay, so that is a concept that I want to bring in, Tadeva Anupravishate, and that also feeds into every component of what we do. Say, for example, when we go to the temple and we worship the deities, do we worship the deities as they are made in stone? No, we worship the deity because Tadeva Anupravishate. So even that deity has got the Supreme Lord who is pervaded in it and makes that deity, gives the deity the reality. So we worship deities in that spirit. So this is unfortunate. This is a concept that has been so prevalent in ancient Vedic philosophy that down over the last few hundred years, it has somehow, this concept is lost, or people have forgotten about it, or the invaders of India had forgotten that this is the Vedic principle of pervaded, but they took us all as idolaters of idol worship. And there's been, as you all know, there's been lots of tussle because of that, because of misknowledge, because of their own ignorance. Yeah. So I think it's up to us to explain. So this is our philosophy, which fits very well with the global philosophy of Tadeva Anupravishate. Moving on to the next slide. Now, this slide is complicated. Now, what I have done is, over the last hour or so before the talk, I've inserted a few verses from Srimad Bhagavatam here, which is there in 4 slides from now. There is I've listed Srimad Bhagavatam's 3rd canto, some verses, but I've put this in, but I'll describe it here. So now, coming back to this, we accept so that this Brahman was there before creation, and that Tama Asit, so this Tamas was there before creation, which is called Mula Prakriti. So then what happened? So Akamayat Bahusyam Prajaye. This Brahman then got this desire. Okay, let me create. So he then stirs the Mula Prakriti into action. Okay, so the traditional rendering there is Brahman says Om Atataha. So then that vibration creates ripples in Mula Prakriti, and those ripples creates 3 sets of entities called Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Okay, so there is some confusion about what the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas actually means. People say Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna, and Tamo Guna. That's correct. But what has gunas? Guna means attributes or qualities. What has qualities? It's the objects that have qualities. So when I talk about Sattva Guna, what I mean is those objects that have the qualities of sattva, those objects that have quality of rajas, those objects that have quality of tamas. So these are the objects that are in a suspended animation in Mula Prakriti. So that is what is going on here. So the Brahman is basically setting out these vibrations, and then the Mula Prakriti goes into motion, and he initially creates these three sets of subtle, very subtle material entities. Okay? Now the three subtle material entities I thought was interesting, because I thought, why sattva, rajas, tamas? Why there should be only three? Why there could have been five? There could have been five different things. There could have been six different things, or there could have been two. Why only sattva, rajas, and tamas? And this seems fully fitting into the current thinking in cosmology, where if you break down matter and keep on breaking it down, you go down to atoms, you go down to neutrons, protons, you break them down, you go into subatomic particles, then you go into quarks, semi-quarks, then you break them further, then you have something called fermions. The current thinking is, mathematically, there can only be three types of fermions. They mix with each other, and different combinations of mixing creates various subatomic particles, and then they become at various subatom, they become neutrons, protons, and so on. So that is the current prevailing hypothesis. It might have changed, but last time when I read this, I was quite intrigued. Three types of fermions, sattva, rajas, guna, three types in our philosophy as well. It is always three, it's not four. So anyway, coming back to this, so Mula Prakriti stirs into action by Brahman three different types of material things with certain attributes are created. So these are called sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay. So here, what I want to do is, I want to take you to a couple of concepts in Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam then starts here, and then he says, creation is of 9 stages. There are 9 stages of creation and 3 types of destruction, and it goes into great length in 3rd canto and also in the 2nd canto. It grows into great length. But here I've listed just a few verses, which is extremely interesting and is also for our own understanding as to all this. What is this Mahat Tattva, Ahamkara Tattva? There's lots of confusion. It helps us place it where they're supposed to be. Okay. So then there is also another verse. The very first verse in Bhagavatam is Yata idanim tadagre cha paschat api etat idrusham. So that is that verse there. So what that means is, in Rig Veda there is a very similar verse called Data Yata Purvam Akalpayat, which means the Supreme Being creates universe every time as how it was in the previous creation. He doesn't bring anything new. How it was in the previous creation, the same thing comes in the new creation. Okay, and that creation happens in 9 stages. The first 6 stage I've listed here. So let us go back to this. So you have sattva, rajas, and tamas. So these are gunas, but when I say guna, it means the objects that have that kind of gunas. They all start mixing. So when they mix, sattva, rajas, tamo gunas are very, very subtle matter. When they mix together, they form what is called as Mahat. Mahat is also a very subtle form of matter. Okay. Now, a part of Mahat, so basically what the philosophy there is, creation and the creation of the universe is starting from the most subtle to become the most gross. From subtle, you become more and more and more gross by mixing. So that is how creation comes about. And we all know, when you make some, palgova, for example, you're taking milk and you heat it until it becomes gross and gross and gross, and you have the palgova to eat. Yeah, it's something like that. So Mahat is a very subtle form of matter. Okay, a portion of the Mahat then becomes a little bit more gross. So that slightly more gross form is called Ahamkara. Okay? You should not confuse this Ahamkara Tattva with the Ahamkara, which is a component of the mind. Yeah, so that you need to be clear. So this Ahamkara is also a part of matter. It is a subtle matter, but slightly more grosser than the Tattva. Then the Vedic philosophy says this Ahamkara Tattva, which is again subtle matter, then a portion of the Ahamkara Tattva divides into three, and it names this as Vaikarika, Tejasa, and Tamasa Ahamkara. Okay, so now remember, these are all still states of matter. They just have specific names in Vedic philosophy. So now the Tamasa Ahamkara then becomes what is called Pancha Tanmatra, which is again subtle matter. And the Pancha Tanmatras then become Pancha Bhutas, which is the gross matter. So what is the gross matter? Akasha, Vayu, Tejas, Ap and Prithvi. The five elements are the gross matter. But the five elements have their origin from Mula Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, Mahat Ahamkara, then Tamasa Ahamkara, Pancha Tanmatra and Pancha Bhuta. Then they become the Akasha, Vayu, Tejas, Ap and Prithvi. Yeah. Now the Pancha Tanmatras are the subtle elements or the qualities of space, Shabda, sound, Vayu, touch, Tejas, form, Ap is rasa, taste, Prithvi, Gandha, smell. So these are subtle forms of matter. We all know Gandha is what? Gandha is what you smell. That smell is not the smell is chemicals, yes? The chemicals that goes to your nostril is what gives you the sense of Gandha. So those chemicals are subtle matter. And that is what the philosophers are saying. When I say Pancha Tanmatra, when I say Gandha, it is that subtle matter. Yeah. So from Tamasa Ahamkara, you get Pancha Tanmatras and Pancha Bhutas. So this should not be confused, that these are all states of matter. Now this gets interesting. So the Vedic philosophy of creation is non-living things. So the jadas that are made in the universe, they go through this path of Mahat Ahamkara, Tamasa Ahamkara, Pancha Tanmatra and Pancha Bhutas. Okay, these are non-living things. So then the Vedic philosopher says, you also need to create other components in this universe so that the souls become aware of the Panchabhutas. Okay? So to become aware of the Panchabhutas, how do we become aware of the external world around us? We use our sense organs. So even those are created. So the philosopher says that the Tejasa Ahamkara, the matter, becomes Karma Indriyas and Jnana Indriyas. Jnana Indriyas, with the Shrotra, Swak, Chakshus, Rasana and Grahana, you perceive the external world. That is the Indriyas. Jnana Indriya and the Karma Indriya. So from the sense object, you are using your sense organs. Now the information has gone into the sense organs, but you still need to process that information. So what happens is the Vaikarika Ahamkara, which is again a type of subtle matter, becomes mind. Mind with five components: Manas, Buddhi, Ahamkara, Chitta and Chetana. And the mind, then you need to create the mind to process all this information that is coming from the sense organs. And the Buddhi is there as a discriminative faculty. So these 24, so I've listed 24 entities, 5 Karma Indriyas, 5 Jnana Indriyas, 5 Tanmatras, 5 Bhutas, Manas, Buddhi, Ahamkara and Mahat. So these form the 24 components of creation. So this is the very first thing that needs to happen even before further creation happens. So this is the 24 big elements. These are elements. Yeah. Now, when you combine these 24 elements, then they become Brahmanda. So you might have heard about the word Brahmanda and how Chaturmukha Brahma sits in it. Okay. So this Brahmanda is a combination of these 24 elements, and this Brahma then brings forth this creation. Yeah. So how does that happen? Okay. Now, what I have told so far is the creation of non-living things. Now, Abhijit, do you want to move to the next slide? The next slide is slightly complicated, but what I want you to understand is some concepts there. So here, I don't want to go into the Mundaka Upanishad and Aitareya Upanishad because of lack of time. Let's just spend time with Purusha Shukta Rikeda. Chandrama Manaso Jato Chakshu Suryo Ajayata Mukha Indrashta Agnishta Pranad Vayu Ajayata. Okay? So what that is saying is that the Mula Prakriti from which all the Jada has come, they are all there in the Supreme Lord's belly. before creation. Then the Chetanas, the sentient beings both creation needs to happen in parallel. So the sentient beings will come out, that is the most exalted sentient beings will come out from various parts of the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being is Jnanananda Swarupa. He is not made of matter. He is purely non-material. He is Jnanananda Swarupa, and similarly the Jivas are also Jnanananda Swarupa. They are non-material. So all these Jivas also come out of the Supreme. Now Mundaka Upanishad, I put a figure there with a flame with sparks that come out of the flames. Mundaka Upanishad explains this, that how do these sentient, these Jivas come out of Brahman, and it gives an example of a fire, and when the fire is burning, how the sparks are coming out. Similarly, the Jivas also come out from the Supreme Being. Okay, so this slide is just to give you that idea. Make your own research at home over the next few days if you can, to give you an idea as to how the Jivas are also coming out from the Supreme, and how from Mula Prakriti, the matter is evolving from the most subtle to the most gross, which is the 5 Panchabhutas. Now, this is the key slide here as to how the whole grand scheme of things of the universe actually fits in. So the Vedic philosophy says Brahman, we spoke about this last week, that Vishnu, for example, is not a sectarian word. It is just another name for Brahman to mean the one that is all pervasive and the creator of the universe. Okay. Now this guy, he basically inspires Mula Prakriti to get into creation. Now the philosophy there is Lakshmi, who is the consort of Vishnu, is the Abhimani Devata of Mula Prakriti. She is also called Chetana Prakriti. Okay, so Vishnu and Lakshmi get together and the universe comes into being. Now, how does Lakshmi do? This is interesting. The Sattva, Rajas and Tamos Guna, Lakshmi, the concept there is Lakshmi becomes 3, Shri, Bhu and Durga. Shri is the deity for Sattva, Bhu for Rajas and Durga for Tamas. Okay, and then Vishnu copulates with Lakshmi and creates Chaturmukha Brahma. Okay? He is the next person who comes down. The 4-faced Chaturmukha Brahma. And what is his body? His body is Mahat. The Mahat that I told you, this whole subtle matter of the universe is Chaturmukha's body. From Chaturmukha comes Rudra. Now Rudra is as we discussed last time, he is the key. Rudra is the key. Now, a portion of Chaturmukha Brahma, so a portion of Mahat becomes Ahamkara, which is the body of Rudra. So Rudra's body is Ahamkara. Now, Rudra is popularly said to have 3 eyes, yeah, which you might have read in mythology. But those 3 eyes basically represents Vaikarika, Tejasa, and Tamasa aspect of Rudra. So those 3 parts of Ahamkara Tattva, his body, is Vaikarika, Tejas and Tamasa, are his 3 eyes. Now, this guy, Rudra, is key for creation. So although he is operating under the control of the Brahman and under Chaturmukha, Rudra is a key player in creation, according to Vedic philosophy. What does he do? The Tamasa Ahamkara becomes 5. Rudra creates a lot of 5s. He is a man of 5s. He creates 5 Pancha Tanmatras. He creates 5 Panchabhutas. He creates 5 Indriyas. And he creates 5 Jnana Indriyas and 5 Karma Indriyas. So from the Tamasa aspect of his body, he creates Pancha Tanmatra and Panchabhutas. From Tejasa aspect of his body, he creates Jnana Indriya and Karma Indriya. From Vaikarika aspect of his body, he creates Manas. And again, as we said, Manas is also 5. Yeah. So Rudra is important in Vedic cosmology of the 5s and the 3. The 3 eyes of Rudra is the Vaikarika, Tejasa and Tamasa. And the Panchamukhi, as Shiva is called, he's called Panchamukhi because it's 5s. Okay? 5, 5, 5. And that is why it is called Prapancha. Okay, and that you probably know is a popular name for the word, Prapancha. Prapancha means not just the 5 bhutas. Prapancha means everything. Okay, these five, it's called Prapancha. So Rudra plays a key role in creation, although one view of Vedic philosophy is he operates, he is a dependent being himself, but he is such an exalted being that he actually brings creation into being. So that is the grand view of how creation happens as per Vedic philosophy. Now, moving on to the next slide, Abhijit. So this creation of the universe in a series of order naturally comes with its consequences. Again, the Vedic view is all the sentient beings that are coming out of the Supreme during creation, each one is different from the other. Each one has a capacity that is different from the other. So the Vedic Pantheon is basically established based on this concept. So on top of this Pantheon is Vishnu, who is ranked number 1. Number 2 is Lakshmi. Number 3 is Chaturmukha. Then it goes to what's called the Rujus. We don't have to go into that. Then you have number 4 is Saraswati. Number 5 is, again note, 5. 5 for Rudra. 5, rank 5. Rudra comes there. Then you have Vishnu's Shanmahishis. Let's forget about those. You look at rank 8 is Indra. I just want to point out a few that we are familiar with. Indra is rank 8. Surya, Chandra, Yama, they are rank 12. Varuna is 13. Agni is 15. Yeah. Look where Ganapati is, 18. Yeah. So these are all some of the ranks of Vedic philosophy that are coming from during creation with various abilities. Now, the other thing that you need to think about this is, in the Vedic Pantheon, is these are not names of souls. These are posts. So posts means you hold that office. So Vishnu and Lakshmi, they are always there. According to the Vedic philosophy, Vishnu and Lakshmi, they are always there. There is no another Lakshmi or there is no Vishnu. There is only one guy. Whereas Chaturmukha Brahma, okay, when he attains his salvation and he goes to Vaikuntha, somebody else will take the Chaturmukha Brahma's post. Okay. Similarly, in the next creation, this Rudra will become Sesha. The Sesha will then take salvation. So that is the view. Yeah, they take posts and then they move into salvation in every creation. So if you want to read more about this, it's very interesting in Shakalya Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, deals with these concepts in some great detail. So you could refer that. So that is the view on the Vedic Pantheon. So what I have told you so far is the grand view of the universe and how it is thought to be happening, both from the Jadas and the Chetanas, and how they mix, and then you get the Dehas. Okay. Now, the stages of creation and evolution of species, because that is a natural progression of it. You have said so far about how all the non-living things from the subtle to the gross has happened. Then you have said how all these jivas are also coming out and how all these exalted beings are coming from various parts of Brahman. So then, so what? How does creation progress further? So in Bhagavatam, in third canto, this is really shocking. When I first read this, I said, man, this is too much. How could our philosophers and our rishis have known all this? We are just trying to find all the origin of species and evolution of things right now. How did somebody 5,000 years ago or 6,000 years ago knew that these things was happening? Because that is exactly what is being discussed in Bhagavatam. It says there are Navavidas Srishti. Yeah, Sargo Navavidas Tasya Prakruto Vaikrutastu Yaha. Okay. Then I spoke up to so Vaikariko. So when I talked about, remember Vaikariko Aham. Yeah. Okay. So Vaikarika Deva Sargaha Panchamo Yen Mayam Manaha. So we left it there in the previous slide up to Manas. Okay. So that is the 5th stage of creation. And then the Bhagavatam says there is a 6th stage that's called Shashtastu. There is a typo error there. It's not Pashtastu, it's Shashtastu. Shashtastu Tamasaha Sargo. So then what happened, I believe, around the 6th stage, this concept of ignorance as an entity came into being. Then all the living beings came into being. The 6th one is very important, because that will give you the idea as to why we
Madhu,
are in.
angry disturbance irukku Madhu.
Okay, I come to that a little bit later. The sixth stage of creation is when ignorance was brought into. I'm fine with that. Okay. So Saptamo, is it okay, Chitra, now?
It was not okay.
Can you just repeat what you were
what
saying?
you said in the past 2 minutes?
Just a minute ago, you were saying something. Like, can you just repeat it, Madhu, please?
Yeah. So I was saying that the fifth stage in this slide, the fifth stage. So in the fifth stage, there was Vaikariko Devasargaha. We left it in the two previous slides. We spoke about how Rudra Ahamkara Tattva has his body. He creates Panchatanmatras, Panchabhutas, 5 Jnanendriya, Karma Indriya, and Manas, 5 components of the Manas. So we stopped at the fifth stage of creation. So again, I want to point out, it is still the fifth stage of creation. Again, Rudra is there in the fifth stage of creation. So Rudra is 5 everywhere. Next is the sixth stage of creation. Shashtastu Tamasaha Sargaha. The sixth stage was created ignorance. Ignorance as a concept came in the sixth stage. And then the living beings then started coming forth in creation. Seventh stage, it says, Shaptamo Mukhya Sargaha. Okay. So this is beautiful. It says the seventh stage of creation is the most important aspect of.
Madhu, you are frozen, Madhu. Freeze airku. Hello? Hello?
What is Zoom time?
It's frozen.
Shalini.
There is initially only water that was there. Okay, so so it said, so in the seventh stage, first there was water, and in water, microbials came first, and it says Sukshma Srishti, Sukshma Jivas, and it says first microbials came into being. Yeah. Can you hear me?
We missed a section. So can you go back to the most important seventh stage?
Yeah. So the seventh stage is the most important stage according to this. Saptamo Mukhya Sargastu. Okay. Shatvida Shrishti of plant kingdom happened, the Bhagavatam says, but also the same description comes in the second canto, where it talks, second canto of Bhagavatam, where it goes into a little bit more detail. It says, you know what? There was first water. There was only water everywhere, and the life originated in water. And initially there was sub-microbials, Sukshma Srishti. So there are lots of microbials first. After microbials came plants. So this is the seventh stage of plants. The plant kingdom came first, is what the Bhagavatam says. And then it says, it goes on and classifies plants are of 6 types. And it describes that, let's not spend too much time on that, but essentially to say there are 6 types of plants that came. After plants came the animal kingdom. And then it goes on to say there are 28 different types of animals. I won't say species, different wide categories of animal kingdom that came. And then it actually lists the various species. And then the 9th stage is Arvak, Shrotrastu Navamaha, Kshattare, Eka Vido Drunam. Okay. Then it says that the 9th stage, the final stage was the creation of the human species. And there is only one human species, it says. Eka Vido Drunam. Drunam means Nara. Nara means man. Eka Vido means only one type. One type of man was created. So what I have taken from this Bhagavatam and what I have told you so far is initially matter, then living things, and the living things is the evolution of species starting from microbials, plants, animal kingdom, and finally the human beings. And it goes on to say there are 8.4 million species of living things that are spread all over the universe. maybe several million on Earth, but in other planets there may be more. And that's what the Bhagavatam is saying. Now, what really struck me from this is no different from any.
Hello, Madhu, திருப்பி freeze ஆயிருக்குங்க. Hello.
Brahman, who is actually inspiring the Mula Prakriti to do everything else through Rudra, Ahamkara, and then all the jivas are put together. In Gita, I want to remind you, there are some key verses that we need to contemplate on. And I picked up a few in chapter 7, 10, and 14. 10th verse. Bijam mam sarva bhutanam viddhi partha sanatanam. Okay, I am the seed for all the sarva bhutanam. Bhutanam means two things. Bhuta means the prapancha, which is the 5 bhutas, but bhutas also means jivas. I am the bija, I am the seed. Okay. Aham atma gudakeshaha sarva bhuta ashraya stitaha. Aham adihi madhyam cha bhutanam anta evacha. I am in the beginning, middle, at the end. I am actually behind everything. Remember that tat srishtva tadeva anupravishata of Taittiriya Upanishad. Krishna is reminding us, don't forget that I am there in everything. So, yeah, sarganam, sarga means creation. In creation, sarganam adimshcha madhyamshcha eva ahameva arjuna. Adir antashta madhyamcha eva aham arjuna. In 10th chapter, he's again reminding. Then in 14th chapter, he's saying, Mamayonir Mahat Brahma Tasmin Garbam Dadami Aham. Okay, Mahat Brahma, there is Mula Prakriti or Chetana Prakriti or Lakshmi. And he says, Tasmin Garbam Dadami Aham. I am the giver of the seed to that Mahat Brahma, and that brings about the various creations. So in these 4 verses, it is actually talking about what we have described in the last few slides. So moving on to the next stage, next slide, Abhijit. So here, having discussed the views of the Vedas and how the Bhagavatam which Bhagavatam we know is written by Veda Vyasa, and Bhagavatam is the essence of the Upanishads. Gita is the essence of the Upanishads. So how it gives a very rational and scientific view of how creation comes into being. So now there is this modern concept of Darwinism versus intelligent design. Yeah, for those of us who are biologically bent, and know there are some of you are of physics, and Darwinism is a key concept of how origin of species and so on happens. So what did Darwin say? Varieties can become species through breeding. That was one of his statements. And that he said evolution is unguided and a natural process. And to build on that, there is this new theory of neo-Darwinism, which says this evolution of species happens through random mutations. Okay, neo-Darwinism through random mutations. So these are the core principles of Darwinism. But
Madhu,
current thinking is, yeah.
Madhu, I mean, one suggestion
Darshan,
was,
can you hear me?
yeah, but one suggestion, like, I think this is a very big topic and it's gone for 1.5 hours, and I think there's so much to take in.
Oh, I'm going to stop now.
No. I'll tell you one thing. It may be better to stop now, and even the last few slides, we need to even repeat it next week, because I think there'll be plenty of questions today. You need to answer that, and then the next week also we'll repeat the second part of it anyway. Is it okay?
Yeah, okay, so that's fine. So what I'll do in that case, Sudarshan, is I'll stop at the stages of creation and evolution of species, and about Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'll stop there. And then maybe what we can do is in the next class or whenever we can do this, we can think about how this whole process of creation actually tallies very well with with origin of species, and it gives you a slightly different view on this, and then it takes you on to the karma and how souls move from up and below with various different species, and maybe we can take it up from next class. I'm sorry, Sudarshan, I went on. I think I got a bit carried away, but maybe next time I'll stick to my time. Okay, I'll stop here and maybe I'll take any questions.
Yeah, it's not about that. I think the topic is very interesting. It's really a wonderful, wonderful discussion and wonderful sort of lecture actually, and there's so much to take. Yeah, so I think you can ask questions.
I did feel that this is, as I said, it's just too much injustice to be done in 1.5 hours. But maybe we'll take it up later. Yeah. Any questions?
I think all participants, you can ask questions now, or probably each one of us give you your view space. Like not just, even if you don't have questions, just give a feedback.
This is
Have I convinced you that ours is not a myth?
I am Janardhan, Professor Madhu.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Madhu. Jai Shri. Jai Shri.
Oh, hello, Jayashree. How are you? Yes.
We have met in Stoke, probably.
We
I
met
have
a
got
few
you-
times. Yeah.
It was quite an interesting, it's an excellent, very interesting one, excellent topics. And it is very wide, excellently covered. But உங்களுக்கு தமிழ் தெரியுமா?
Yes.
Okay, I will share a certain questions வந்து தமிழ்ல தான் எனக்கு தெரியும். ரெண்டாவது,
சொல்லுங்க.
the thing is,
Ask if there are non-Tamil
is there anybody who was in non-Tamil who cannot?
Sir, there are plenty of non-Tamil people, sir. You need to speak in
I
English.
can do the translation. Don't worry. You ask.
Okay, that's good. I will ask the first doubt. Last few things. You tell the pantheon of gods. You gave Rudra 6th or 7th rank or something. 6th rank. Correct? 5th rank. After Saraswati. Am I right? But when I came through the references, it says the position of Pasupati or Rudra is rather strange in Vedic religion. In ritual text, all the other gods are asked to come to the place of sacrifice, but Rudra and his followers, the Rudriyas, were asked to go away. The example is where it comes. The Rudra was called that this god denigrated, and those gods' name was contained in the word Bhuta or Pashu. That's or Bhutapati or Pasupati. The name of Rudra is occurring in Rig Veda 11.3.1 was purposely mispronounced as Rudriya. This is Atreya Brahmana third. This shows which means in Vedic gods, Rudra was not considered as a god itself, as God himself. Is it correct?
Yes. So I think that the definition there is,
Yeah.
you're right in the sense. The question is, what does God means? I am talking about Brahman, the
True, but
supreme being.
when it comes to the question of the ranking or even giving the status of God after Saraswati, even in Vedic time, which is Rigvedic time, even he was given the status of accepting a sacrifice. He was denied. He was not even accepted as a god. When Indra, Varuna, all these people were accepted as gods and given sacrifice, and given when Rudra was denied, he was not even allowed to go get into the sacrificial place.
Can I talk for a minute in this, please? According to Bhagavatam,
Yeah.
Daksha Prajapati,
Yeah.
father of Sati,
Yeah.
he was the person, I mean, I'll put it to personality. He was the person who made this Rata, I mean, what is the Yajnas and all. That time he denied Pashupati or Rudra because he didn't want his daughter to be married to him because he was not up to his, she was Prajapati's daughter. That is the time when Rudra was denied all the sacrificial rites. Before that, we don't know. What Madhuji is talking, I thought it's before the creation.
So, okay. So I think that if I can come here, I think there are two different aspects here. You are, Janardhan ji is coming from a Puranic view of Shiva.
Yeah.
In the Puranas, in Shaivagamas, in the Shiva Agamas and Pashupata Agamas, of the concept of Shiva or Rudra and how he is placed. Yeah. So what I am coming from here is, I am coming from a purely Vedic philosophy point of view as it existed initially, before all these subdivisions and differentiations have happened. Number one. Number two, Rudra as a, when I say God, I have to clarify that God is only one. Ekameva Advitiyam, and who is the creator, who is Brahman. That is one. There is no doubt about that. Now, there are various demigods who have certain portfolios in the conduct of the affairs of the universe. Chaturmukha Brahma has certain responsibilities according to the Vedic view. His body is made of Mahat and he does certain things in the universe. Similarly, Rudra is another entity, another sentient being who has Ahamkara Tattva as his body, and he has certain affairs that he conducts in the universe. Yeah. So that is his portfolio, as it were, and his portfolio is a limited portfolio. What I would suggest is, there is a particular adhikaranam in Vedantasutra where Vedavyasa has dealt with this. It's called Pashupatya adhikaranam. Okay. It's called Pashupatya adhikaranam in Vedantasutra, where Vedavyasa resolves these conflicts about what is the Vedic position on the portfolio of Pashupati. Okay. And what is even more interesting is, so I am taken, my Bhashyas of Vedanta Sutras will be either Sri Bhashya of Ramanuja or 4 Bhashyas of Madhvacharya. You should go to Sankaracharya's Bhashya, which is even more interesting. If you go to Shankaracharya's Bhashya on Pashupatya Adhikaranam of Vedavyasa, of creatorship of the universe, what is the role of Pashupati? Yeah, you would find your answer, I feel. So maybe we can carry on with this conversation outside this.
And one more doubt is about, sorry, this I have not properly understood. It's only clarifying my doubts I'm asking. The Panchabhutas and the Panchatanmatras. In my understanding, it says from Bhulokam, in Bhulokam, Nilam, Neer, Ti, Kaatru, Veli, which is Akasa, which is Panchabhutas. From there, it's the gunas are there: Gandham, Rasam, Rupam, Sparsham, Sabdam. From there,
these are Tanmatras.
Yeah, Tanmatras. But there, whereas Karanavastuvin Kodam Karyathukku Pogum. Right? Taitri, it says, the example is given in Taitri Upanishad. It says Akashat Vayu, Vayor Agni, Agnor Apa, Adabhya Prithvihi. Akashathilirundu Vayu. Yeah. From Akasha, Vayu comes. From Vayu, Agni. From Agni, water. From water is created the land. Right? So, from this, from Akasha, when Vayu comes, it has got a Sparsham. And Sparsham, Sabdam. Then Sabdam, from Agni, Rupam plus Sparsham, plus Sabdam. For Agni, it is Agni is Rupam, it's Rasam, Rupam, Sparsham, and Sabdam. For water, which for land, it's Gandham, Rasam, Rupam, Sparsham, and Sabdam. All these gunas are coming, isn't it?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I cited that Upanishad in one of the slides when I was listing 24. That is it's a key Upanishad. Tasmad va etasmad atmanaha akasha sambhutaha akashad vayuhu vayur agnihi agner apaha adabhyo prithvihi prithivyo aushadayaha aushadabhyo annam annat purushaha. Yeah. Yes. So that is the sequence. So you're absolutely right. So the first one is akasha. Atmanaha Akashaha Sambhutaha. Now the question is, who is that Akasha? So the Akasha, for example, is the sky as we know it. Yeah. In the Vedic parlance, there are 2 types of Akashas. There is something called Bhuta Akasha and there is something called Avyakrita Akasha.
Okay.
Okay. So this is interesting. I'm going to ask you a question. If the point of singularity was there, where was the point of singularity? It has to be somewhere, right? In some place.
In some place.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be there somewhere, someplace. So that is called Avyakrita Akasha, which is not, it is not made of the matter. Whereas the Bhuta Akasha is the first element, gross element that comes from the Shabda Tanmatra. Shabda Tanmatra is a very subtle aspect of that, and that differentiates into Akasha. And then the Vedic Pantheon would say the Abhimani Devata of Bhuta Akasha is Ganesha, Ganapati. Ganapati is the Abhimani Devata of Akasha. So then that Akasha, what happens is there is subtle matter there. The subtle matters condense and becomes air. Now the air, there is friction. The airs hit each other. When they have friction, heat is formed. So that is stages. So when air and heat is formed, you get water. Now that is a liquid state. And when the liquid state becomes more and more gross, it becomes a solid state. So when you take Akasha, Vayu, Tejas, Prithvi, what it is actually meaning is the states of matter. You have the gaseous state, you have the plasma state, you have the liquid state, and you have the solid state of matter that is saying. And as you said, the solid state, Prithvi, will have all the above qualities as well. It will have the Apnas, the Tejas, the Vayu in it, and the space in it, because solids have space in them. So you're right. I completely agree with you on that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Madhu, can I ask a question?
Yeah. Please, can you introduce?
Sushruth here.
Oh, Shushruth. Hi. Yes.
Okay. So going back to creation, I think we have discussed this before, where Krishna says in the Gita that souls always existed, I always existed, you always existed. These are never created or destroyed. And now you said that the souls were created from Brahman.
Okay. So what I meant there was you mean from Brahman, yeah? So
Yeah.
in Brahman, so Brahman is one, Chaturmukha Brahma is one. So
No, Brahman, original.
Original, yeah. So the view there is in Pralaya. So the souls are uncreated. So we know that that famous verse, chapter 2, verse 12. Yeah, Natvevaham Jatunasam Natvam Neme Janadipaha Nachaiva Bhavishyamaha Sarve Vayam Ataha Param. Yeah. There was never a time that I existed, you existed, or all these things, we all existed forever. So that in the Pralaya state, what is happening there is all these jivas are in suspended animation. Okay? They still have what's called as the Linga Sharira in them. They are supposed to be in the belly of the Supreme. They are supposed to be the ordinary jivas like you and I are in the belly of the Supreme. And He has never created them. They are always there. So during creation, what happens is He throws them into existence. He links them with their bodies. So for jivas, the creation is, so there are various types of creations. One creation is from de novo, from nothing you bring into something. The another one is modification. A mud becoming a pot is another form of creation. A third form of creation is for the jivas, where the jivas are linked to a deha or a body. That is a creation for the jiva. So in that sense, they are created, that the Panchabhutas become the body and they get attached to that. So that is their creation. But essentially, the view is they are not uncreated.
Thank you.
Hi, Madhu, it's Nandish here.
Hi, Nandesh, yes.
Hi. No, I think beautiful exposition, Madhu. Sort of, you combined the science, the Big Bang theory, and it's just mind-boggling actually to contemplate that so many thousands of, without the scientific sort of instruments or anything, we know now the universe is expanding because we know the red light shift theory, and we know so many things, but it's just mind-boggling. So amazing. I was just reading something else, and there's something called Lalita's Sahasranama. Yeah, it talks about sort of another universe, a parallel universe with an Earth-like planet 5 times bigger than us, and where Kailash exists, and so
Wow.
where and how does that sort of link?
I mean, that's wonderful to hear that. I have to admit, I don't know much about Lalita Sahasranama, but I'm sure there will be somebody amongst us who is listening who will know more about that than me. Anybody who wants to contribute there, please?
No, not an issue. I think it was just something which I was trying to link up, these things. And
so the parallel universe theory, I had a slide.
Yeah.
My future slides are coming. I said Yata Keshalo Mani, okay, in Mundaka Upanishad, one of the creation's aspects is multiple universes come out of the Brahmans as how hair comes out of the man. So the universe that we have right now, that we are talking about, is only one universe. The Vedic view has always been there are multiple universes that are always there. So
Wow.
that idea is there, that he brings forth several universes. We are
Right.
this is an artificial name for this creation that we got. We just call it as universe.
I see. I see.
I think
Okay.
Madhu.
Yeah.
Last month there was a report that there is some activity outside our universe. That there is a Big Bang has happened somewhere else.
Oh gosh. Okay, that's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, there was something about an explosion. Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
So the one thing I found interesting was I was in this book called Rethinking Darwin. He brings about this physicist brings about a concept which is again very similar to Vedic. It's called Kupa Mandukya Nyaya. Kupa Manduka Nyaya means there is a frog sitting in a well, and this frog sitting in a well is looking up at the sky, and it is also looking at its own pond. It's saying, "Oh my God, this pond is so big. This must be the largest pond that ever exists." So similarly, this physicist is saying, what we are doing at this point is, we as physicists, we are an insect sitting in the well, and we are looking at the sky, which is a tiny portion of the universe that we are looking at, what's called as the observable universe, and we are coming out with our own hypothesis of how the universe functions. There is lots more to it that none of us know, and Nandesh will know about this. There's lots of dark matter, I believe, which exist out there, and we don't even know where they are. And similarly, the universe is outside. Yeah.
And also I think extending it sort of, because we think it's they call it also the Goldilocks ideal condition. That's why the earth has existed and so on, because we had this perfect condition, not too hot, not too cold, exact ratio of, as you described, the electromagnetic to the nuclear energy and so on. So there could be others as well. So amazing, fantastic. I won't take any more time. Thank you very much, Madhu.
Thanks.
Hello, sir. This is Ram here.
Sorry?
You told about this 24 sort of tattvams or something like that, where from Mula Prakriti everything came by. Right? So I believe that I read somewhere that there are so many bhuvanams, like whatever Earth-like things that we have got. The universe is so big that there might be other planets and other these things where things are there. So is this applicable to those also? Like when we talk about the whole thing, it is applicable for everything, is it?
Yeah, this is the whole universe description. And the Vedic view has always been, Earth is not alone in the solar system. There are hundreds of places where there are living beings that move from top to bottom. They come from other lokas to Earth, and the Earth fellows go elsewhere, Swargaloka, all these 14 lokas that are there. Then you have Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, Tapaha, Mahaha, Janaha, Satyam. So you have all these various lokas that the Vedas talk about, and these lokas have several thousands, millions of planets where there are living beings. And these fellows come down and go up. These are higher intelligences, and the Vedic philosophy will call them as demigods. And there are so many, one other slide I had was these exalted beings. Some places they say there are 33 crores demigods. Some places there are 9 crore demigods who are of higher intelligence, and there are lots of jivas all over the place. So this is applicable to the whole universe. So that would make sense because, I don't know whether you've seen that movie called Contact, about this movie about how you come in contact with another intelligent species. And in that movie, they talk about thinking about this Earth as a 1D place in the universe where there is life is an irrational argument. This universe is so vast, and there are so many galaxies in our own Milky Way, and there are so many solar systems in our own galaxy, and there are so many billions of galaxies in the universe there has to be more Earth-like planets. And every time we'll hear something about some telescope has picked up some Earth-like object rotating somewhere. So I think it's just a question of time. If coronavirus can happen as a pandemic, then it may be that one day we will get in touch with the extraterrestrial intelligence. And I think that's happened already, in the Vedas. Several thousand years ago, they would say somebody came in some vimana and then went back. So in cosmic time, 5,000, 6,000 years is probably nothing. So these things has to be there. I think people are more and more recognizing that we are not alone in the universe, and that probably the Vedic view is right. And most cosmologists say the Hindu cosmology is so similar to current cosmology.
And also I've heard in other Saiva lectures that they say that this Rudra is not the same as Shiva.
So, okay.
What we are talking about Rudra being the destroyer is not the same as the Shiva, who is quite similar to what Vishnu is, the name Vishnu is.
Yeah. So I agree. So if you go to Vishnu Sahasranamam, Shiva is a name for Vishnu. And again, if you go to Vishnu Sahasranamam, Rudra is also a name of Vishnu. So that's why I keep saying, so these are not sectarian names. They have an etymological sense behind them. So that is one point. The other one, as I haven't touched, is Rudra, as he's saying. So you have Vasu, Rudra, Adityas. So Vasus, there are 8 Vasus. Ekadasha Rudraha. So there are 11 Rudras. They're not just one Rudras. There are 11 Rudras according to Vedic Pantheon. And then you have Dwadasha Adityas. You have 12 Adityas. Aditi's children, there are 12. One among is Vivashwan, the sun. So there are many Rudras. It all depends on in which angle you see it. So the 11 Rudras that I spoke about, they have certain portfolios. And then you have the Rudra as Brahman, who's a creator. That creator has infinite forms and he has infinite names. And one among his infinite names is also Rudra. He is also called Shiva.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I think we are running over time now, and I think if there are no more questions, or if you got questions, you can keep it for next week, please. And let us thank Madhu once again. Clap hands.
Yes.
Thank you, Madhu.
That was fantastic.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
Again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madhuji.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Vanakkam.
Thank you.
Bye.
Leave meeting.
Thank you.
Leave meeting.
Thank you, Madhu. Great lecture.